And just a reminder of what we're doing here. So we're looking for active threats on Linux, malware and hackers, etc. And this is the tool SysTig, the GUI version of SysTig. And SysTig makes it much easier when you're starting out because you don't have to remember all of the variables. Plus, it actually adds more functionality. It is the usual strace, tcpdum, lsoff, and lua scripts that you get with the command line tool, but it also adds htop, iftop, and iotop equivalency into one tool. So this is SysTig here, which you can see, which looks a little bit like htop as it is at the moment. This is the default look of it. Let me just exit out of this for a moment. So that's Q, just so I can show you how you start it. And you simply start it with SysTig, and you need to run it as root. There we are, back into SysTig. And as you can see, as I said, it looks like htop, and that is a design choice. And if you're familiar with htop, a lot of the keys that work in htop are the same for SysTig. Now, if you look here, we can see we've got our process IDs here. We've got our CPU usage. We've got the user that has launched this particular process. There's the number of threads, one thread. We've got virtual memory here, the total virtual memory that's being used by this process. Then we've got the residual memory, that's the real memory, the actual physical memory that's being used. Then here we've got the file IO bandwidth, which is generated by the process, and the same here, but for the network, so it's a network IO bandwidth generated by the process. And then we can see here, we've got the actual command line for that process, and we can scroll to the right as well if we want to see further of the command line, and we can scroll back, and we can sort by any of these. You can see it's currently sorted by CPU, and this is actually a GUI, so you can click on things. So I can sort here via the process ID, or I can sort by the amount of memory that is being used, or even the amount of network traffic that is being used. So what we're seeing here, this is a real-time live analysis, and it's being updated every 2 seconds. If I press quit, I can actually change that so it doesn't have to be every 2 seconds. So that would be SysTig -D, and then the number of seconds. So 5,000 there is 5 seconds. And this will update live every 5 seconds. So that's somewhat useful using the live analysis, but generally what is more useful is to create a trace file. So if you remember with SysTig, we created trace files. Well, we can use those, or we can create other trace files and just import them into SysTig. So let's quit out of here again. So this is the command here that I used to previously capture a trace. And then to open that trace in SysTig, it's the -R option and then the file name. And that brings us into the GUI version again. But as you can see, it has stopped updating. And we can see here that it says source filedump.scap. And we are viewing in the default view the processes. And it's for the whole machine because when the capture was done, there was no filters on it. And in the current view, this is the current filter. So one of the most significant things you can do here is you can change the views. And that's accomplished by pressing here or by pressing F2. So these are all of the various different filters that are available and built into it. And I'll point out some of the more useful ones when it comes to trying to find malware and other threats. So one of the most important for finding some sort of command and control or remote access is the connections. And as it says here, this is top network connections. This view lists all the network connections that were active during the last sampling interval. So click return, and that takes us into here, and we can see all of the various network connections. We've got HTTPS, HTTP, domain lookups, and an 8080 connection. And if we scroll along, we can see the commands that were used in order to generate that traffic. So we can look for anything particularly unusual there. So let's go back to views. There is spy syslog. So this will show entries written to the syslog. That can be quite useful. You can see there. We've got spy users. This lists all the commands that are run interactively, i.e. that have a shell as the parent process. The result is the display of all user activity sorted by time. So the user Nathan definitely looks like he maybe have been up to no good. We can see here there's a cat of the SSH private key file. And as I am Nathan, and I did not do that, then someone under my context must have done that. And we'll check that out in a second. Just let me show you some more filters. F2 back to get to the filters. We have directories. This view lists the directories that were accessed on the file system. You can sort that in various different ways. That's pretty good. And we've also got files. This view lists the files that were accessed on the file system, as you can see there. So let's go back to our connections, because we know somebody has been on this machine, so there must have been some sort of connection. So if we look here and we scroll along, we can see what's been going on. And we can see some sort of Python here being run, and that is actually a reverse shell. There's a reverse shell back to demo.stationx.net on port 8080, and then launch this process here. So that's an interactive shell that they've created. Now if I go on here and I go on echo, which is F5, I can see a readable buffer. If I press F2 again in here, so if I do another view, now you can see the view's different this time when I'm pressing F2, because my view is based on what I'm currently filtered on. So I can change it to printable ASCII or dotted ASCII or hex. There we can see here that Python has been used to do a DNS lookup on demo.stationx.net. If I go back, and if I look at the connection on 8080, which is back to the demo.stationx.net server, and I click on F5 again to do a echo, we can see here what's happened on this reverse shell. So we can see we've done a pwd, change the directory, ls-la, there's the results, change to the SSH directory, and then finally there's a cat there to receive or steal the SSH private key, and there is the private key being displayed. And if you see here, you can see the filter. It automatically creates the filter as we dig through. So it's the same as Sysdig, but it's just creating those filters for us. So let's go back again. And you can see we've got F4. We can actually filter on here. So if we just wanted to look for, say, things that had Python in it, we could do that. And we can just get the Sysdig output for that particular filter by pressing F6. There we can see all of the Sysdig details and connections. And you can see there how we're doing the ls and then changing to the SSH directory from the full Sysdig for that connection. So let's go back to processes. And if you can see here, we've got the number of threads. So for example, VBBox has got 2 there. So if we press enter, we can see the 2 threads there. Wherever you are, you can drill down into a selection by pressing enter, and you can navigate back by pressing the backspace. If we go through enter again, and then we see there if we press enter again, that thread was actually not doing anything. If we press back again, go up to the GNOME shell, enter on that one, enter on that one, and we can see there some of the files that that thread has been interactive with. You can press enter again on that one, and we can see the actual command there that was run. And if I do a dig here, so F5, we can see there we've got a read of the proc self stat directory, and so on. Now back to the processes. Function F4 to filter by Python, the issue that we found. And we've got 2 Python processes. The top one is not an issue. The second one is the shellcode that was run. Press enter on that one. There we can see the thread that was running. And if we press enter on it again, as I've just done, we can see all of the files it was interacting with. Now, because this was done with Python, this makes it a little bit more complicated because Python will interact with a lot of files as default anyway. As you can see here, it's looking up host and host config, just really to do standard network connection stuff. And just to demonstrate to you again, if I press F2 here again, I have a slightly different number of views. And that view is based on the current filters that I've got. Because I'm viewing files, and I'm viewing files for this particular process ID and this particular thread. And for that, I can then, for example, look at connections. And we can see the connection there. So as you can see, quite a powerful tool there. Lots you can do with it to explore and find potential threats, malware, hackers. I recommend you check out the Sysdig quick reference guide, which you can find here. And also there's some Sysdig example commands here, which you can go through, help you get started. So that's Sysdig and csysdig.